There are stories we know that we know so well that we love to hear someone tell them because we can tell them at the same time in our heads. And the Wicked Witch declared, "And the last to go," looking at Dorothy, "will see the first three go before her." And then, taking fire from a lantern nearby with her broom, she threw the fire on the Scarecrow and said, "How about a little fire, Scarecrow?" And Dorothy, simply wanting to save her friend, saw a bucket of water nearby. And she grabbed the bucket and she threw it on the Scarecrow, hitting the witch at the same time. "No!" the witch cried. "I'm melting!" Or for the baseball fan out there, there was ease in Casey's manner as he stepped into his place. There was pride in Casey's bearing, and a smile lit Casey's face. And when responding to the cheers, he lightly doffed his cap. No stranger in the crowd could doubt 'twas Casey at the bat. 10,000 eyes were on him as he rubbed his hands with dirt. 10,000 tongues applauded as he wiped them on his shirt. Then while the writhing pitcher ground the ball into his hip, defiance flashed in Casey's eye. A sneer curled Casey's lip. And now the leather-covered sphere came hurtling through the air, and Casey stood a-watching in the haughty grandeur there. Close by the sturdy batsman, the ball unheeded sped. "That ain't my style," said Casey. "Strike one," the umpire said. From the benches dark with people there went a muffled roar, like the beating of the storm waves on a stern and distant shore. "Kill him! Kill the umpire!" someone shouted in the stand, and it's likely they'd have killed him had not Casey raised his hand. With a smile of Christian charity, great Casey's visage shone. He stilled the rising tumult. He bade the game go on. He signaled to the pitcher, and once more the dun sphere flew. But Casey still ignored it. And the umpire said, "Strike two." "Fraud!" cried the maddened thousands, and an echo answered, "Fraud!" But one scornful look from Casey and the audience was awed. They saw his face grow stern and cold. They saw his muscles strain, and they knew that Casey wouldn't let that ball go by again. The sneer is gone from Casey's lip. His teeth are clenched in hate. He pounds with cruel violence his bat upon the plate. And now the pitcher holds the ball, and now he lets it go. And now the air is shattered by the force of Casey's blow. Oh! Somewhere in this favored land, the sun is shining bright. The band is playing somewhere. And somewhere hearts are light. And somewhere men are laughing. And somewhere children shout. But there is no joy in Mudville. Mighty Casey has struck out. But what if somebody told you your beloved story, the story you knew so well, and changed the ending? And the Wicked Witch declared, "And the last to go," looking at Dorothy, "will see the first three go before her." And then, taking fire from a lantern near her with her broom, she threw the fire upon the Scarecrow. And the Scarecrow began to panic. "Fire! Fire! I'm on fire!" he cried. And Dorothy, only wanting to save her friend, saw a bucket of water nearby, and she grabbed the bucket of water and she threw it on the Scarecrow, hitting the witch. "No! You messed up my makeup!" And with one blow, she set the Scarecrow back on fire and dispatched Dorothy. The sneer is gone from Casey's lip. His teeth are clenched in hate. He pounds with cruel violence his bat upon the plate. And now the pitcher holds the ball. And now he lets it go. And now the air is shattered by the force of Casey's blow. Oh! Somewhere in this favored land, the sun is shining bright. The band is playing somewhere, and somewhere hearts are light. But that joy is not, I tell you, to the joy this day did bring. when Casey hit the ball so hard, 'twas never seen again. Kids, how would you feel if you went to see that last Harry Potter movie? The very last one, or you popped it into the video player. And all of a sudden, at the end, it was Voldemort who triumphed? How'd you feel? You'd feel betrayed, of course. Fooled. Shortchanged. Even angry. Now imagine that this beloved story is not just a story, but the story of your people. A story your people, your nation, your religion has been counting on for years. When he came to Nazareth, where he had been brought up, he went to the synagogue on the Sabbath day, as was his custom. He stood up to read, and the scroll of the prophet Isaiah was given to him. He unrolled the scroll and found the place where it was written, "The Spirit of the Lord is upon me because he has anointed me to bring good news to the poor. He has sent me to proclaim release to the captives and recovery of sight to the blind, to let the oppressed go free, to proclaim the year of the Lord's favor." And he rolled up the scroll, gave it back to the attendant, and sat down. The eyes of all the synagogue were fixed on him. Then he began to say to them, "Today, this scripture has been fulfilled in your hearing." We read this passage like Christians, or frankly, like it would be read by many modern Jews. Without question, it's a really nice passage. But Jesus is quoting Isaiah 61. And when you go to Isaiah 61, you see something peculiar. Jesus changes the ending. He changes it by leaving part of it out. Mid-verse, actually. In other words, he says, or rather he doesn't say, "the day of vengeance of our God." In other words, he says, "He has sent me to proclaim release to the captives and recovery of sight to the blind, to let the oppressed go free, to proclaim the year of the Lord's favor," and then leaves out, "and the day of vengeance of our God." And then he says, "Today this scripture is fulfilled in your hearing." Or the scripture to where I stopped, that's fulfilled. That beloved ending you love so much, the part I left out, not that. You have to remember in the Bible there is a thread. In the Old Testament, there's this wonderful thread of gospel. And it says that one day all of the Gentiles will flow to Israel, to Zion. But there was also this thread, a thread popular with the people of Jesus' time, that said all will bow to Jerusalem in the process. In other words, the return to empire, to David, to earthly power. And that idea, it is ripe in this verse that Jesus chooses to skip. "And the day of vengeance of our God." Vengeance that would put Israel back on top of the earthly heap again. We notice in this reading that Jesus at first is praised. But then suddenly, the tables turn. Some have probably noticed their beloved ending is not there. Some start to mumble, "Wait, we know this kid, he's not that special." And Jesus responds, "Doubtless you will quote to me this proverb, 'Doctor, cure yourself,' and you will say, 'Do here also in your hometown the things we've heard you did in Capernaum.' And he said, 'Truly I tell you, no prophet is accepted in the prophet's hometown. But the truth is, there were many widows in Israel in the time of Elijah. And yet Elijah was sent to none except a widow at Zarephath in Sidon. There were also many lepers in Israel in the time of the prophet Elisha, and none of them was cleansed except Naaman the Syrian. And this Woo-hoo. This sets him off. For he has not only failed to tell the story correctly, to include Israel's ascent to power through the anger of God, but now he's gone and he has pointed out stories from the Bible that show God's love for non-Jews, that show Elijah and Elisha, who are really the superheroes of the Jewish prophets, feeding and curing non-Jews in a time when Jews were suffering. These words, they get Jesus taken to the cliff. And only God saves him. We know our stories. We know how we want our stories to end. And we don't want anybody messing with that. And when the story involves us and God, or when it involves us and our nation and God, we all know how we want it to end. With us on top of the heap. This is incredibly human. This is an incredibly human desire. And the people of Israel were no different than anybody else. But the message of Jesus is clear and simple. God writes the end. And the ending will be written in love, not in human desires for revenge or power or supremacy. Good news to the poor, sight to the blind, release to the captives. That's how the story will end, because the story will end with the recognition that everyone is important. A child of God, eternally loved. Of course, this story sets a tone for Luke. It's really setting the tone for the entire ministry of Jesus. And as we read of him, as we follow him, we have to realize God's going to change the ending on us. God is going to change the ending until the ending becomes about everyone. Until the ending lifts up the lowly, brings down the haughty, and assures that all have what they need in this life and in the next. But if we have the courage to let that ending be changed, to help God write it, the story will end more beautifully than any of us could imagine.